Hello? Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you're Ronan.
Okay. Ngayon ko dili. Hello, hello, hello! Good afternoon, everyone. Give me a thumbs up or a reaction daw kung buhay pa mo. Okay. Reactions. There we go. There we go. Where are the beautiful faces ng RMC School of Law? Oh, ang dami. So as to give her ladies
Recording
and
in
gentlemen, to the
progress.
championship round for the first ever Rizalian Cup. To officially start the program, let us all together entreat and indulge with collective fervor in the opening prayer and subsequently the singing of the national anthem.
Bayang mabiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisag ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nagnidinig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidinig. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, mamamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
And now let us all offer our ears to the opening address by the president of the Diyalogo Debate Club, Ms. Walbert M. Golin.
Thank you so much, Ronan. A pleasant afternoon to everyone. It is with great honor to welcome you all to the first Rizalian Cup Championship round. But before that, I want to acknowledge the presence of our honorable adjudicators this afternoon. Attorney Danielle Joanna Gaite, Attorney Arvin Paulo Cortez, and of course, Attorney Maria Veronica Manalo, the Faculty Advisor of Diyalogo. I want also to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests this afternoon, starting with our Assistant Dean, Attorney Marian Castillo Pasha. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Attorney Marian. And to all of you, the students of the Rizal Memorial Colleges Incorporated School of Law, especially to those who took the challenge to compete for the first edition of the Rizalian Cup, speaking from my heart, you all gave justice to the efforts of the people behind this historic event. Your active participation as we celebrate the first anniversary of the Diyalogo Club. This is just the beginning. Thank you and hope everyone will enjoy the program this afternoon.
Thank you for those endearing words, Ms. Walbert. Needless to say, actually, we are all pumped up in excitement. I can feel it, actually. The virtual Zoom air is electric with anticipation. But of course, we cannot begin this afternoon's ultimate brawl of brain and utterance without having introduced first the very contestants destined to fight and wrangle by word and wit. Thus, allow me to call on the two contending teams and their respective members. In the defense of the government, Team C, the members of which are Angelo Carol Osio as the Prime Minister, Virginia Rose Valdivieso as the Deputy Prime Minister, and Marlon J. Cabase as the government whip. And from the opposition, Team B, the members of which are Ricardo Musa Jr. as the leader of the opposition, Marian Ibanez as the deputy leader of the opposition, and Bobit Jerome Tumuran as the opposition whip. Of course, a debate is no debate without its adjudicators. The very individuals flung into a sea of heated discourse, tasked to absorb arguments, unearth logic, settle disputes, and make do with what as much or as little as sound reasoning can make. And by golly, we have an epic roster of adjudicators this afternoon. Their many heavy responsibilities in this final bout are only ever matched by their vast and shining qualifications, and allow me the pleasure to introduce them. First off, she is an associate at Kisimbing Torres, which is a member firm of Baker McKenzie International Dispute Resolution Practice Group. She graduated from Ateneo de Manila Law School. She is a former president of the Ateneo Society of International Law, and she was an oralist during the 2019 Philip C. Jessup Moot Court competition. And their team entered the semifinals of the Philippine rounds, in which she was ranked 11th among the oralists in the competition. She was a student coach during the 2018 John H. Jackson Court competition, wherein all three oralists of the Ateneo Philippine team achieved rank in the top 10 oralists in the preliminary rounds of the competition. In 2017, she was the oralist of the same moot court competition and ranked the 9th in the final oral records held in Geneva, Switzerland. And she was a first runner-up oralist during the East Asian regional rounds held in Singapore. Allow me to introduce the lovely attorney Danielle Joanna Gaite.
Hello, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for that very flattering introduction.
You're welcome. Next, he is a private petitioner at Cortes Law Office, a graduate from Ateneo de Manila Law School. He was the president Foundation of Liberty and Prosperity Scholar Society, and a part-time professor at Ateneo de Naga University College of Law. He is the very dashing attorney Arvin.
Thank you very much, everyone, and it's nice to see you again. And it's nice to see also Attorney Danny again after a few years. Thank you.
Thank you both. For a final adjudicator, she's an attorney at the Department of Tourism, Republic of the Philippines, a champion, 31st Pi Sigma Open Debate Tournament, best debater, first Laurel Cup Constitutional Debate Tournament, champion and best applicant memorial at the 2017 Pan Asia Human Rights Moot Court Competition. Of course, she is brilliance personified, our very own attorney Maria Veronica Manalo.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Ronan, and good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, now that we are all acquainted with the competitors and the adjudicators, it is now time to light the fires in this virtual arena, sound the war horns of battle, and let the final debate begin. Pro tip, eager debaters, we have designated timers for this final match in the persons of Ms. Walbert Goling and Ms. Lizel de la Peña. In addition to the personal timers that you may have enlisted in your own space, you may opt to pin the windows of those of the designated timers, as they will be announcing important timestamps with visual indicators in all of your speeches. So, to officially start the round, allow me first to read the motion. This House believes that college education should be a prerequisite qualification in order to run for the position of Philippine president. To launch the government stance, let us have the Prime Minister. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable adjudicators, a pleasant afternoon. On the line of this debate is the fate of our country, the future of our society, and our right to choose the one who will lead the Filipino people. The President's position is of paramount importance as he leads the Philippines 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. So the government believes that those who will be seeking the position of President should have a college education. For the purpose of this debate, we propose that college education would mean that the President must hold a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate academic degree awarded by colleges and universities upon completion of a course of study lasting 3 to 6 years, depending on institution and academic discipline. Lest we be misconstrued, we do not dwell on the constitutionality of the provision under Article 7, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution, which prescribes the qualification of the President and the equal protection as enshrined under Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution. This House imposes the additional qualification without infringing the right of the people to run for public offices. Thus, the constitutionality of the present argument is not the issue at hand, since we could always revise or amend our constitution, especially if it benefits the Filipino people. As held by the court in the case of Pamatong versus Comelec, the state has a compelling interest to ensure that its electoral exercises are rational, objective, and orderly. The state takes into account the practical considerations in conducting elections. Even the privilege of equal access to opportunities to public office may be subjected to limitations. That's why the Comelec cancels certificates of candidacy of nuisance candidates, right? So again, the issue is whether those who will be seeking the position of president should have a bachelor's degree. And for us, it's a big yes. Let me tell you why. Allow me to advance two arguments why the president should have a bachelor's degree. First, the education is now accessible. And second, the president is regarded as the sole organ and authority in external relations. As to my first argument, education is now accessible. Hence, the additional requirement for a president to have a bachelor's degree is not a burden. So let us begin at the beginning of time. The first constitution, the Malolos Constitution, the people elected Emilio Aguinaldo. Emilio Aguinaldo left school early to help his mother run their family farm. He did not finish college, but he was elected because he was focused on military matters, which was essential since the country was in a siege or war. Moreover, before, education was a privilege and only the elites could have the luxury to go to school. Even the methods of teachings were criticized, as we have all read Noli Me Tangere et El Filibusterismo. So since education was not established at this point, and the problem was on fighting democracy, the people obviously would want a leader that would help them fight. That is why they chose a leader who is engaged in military services. And then look at what Emilio Aguinaldo did after winning the war. He decided on things that would lead us to war with Americans and eventually giving us up on them. Now we move to the present. The current educational system aims to impart knowledge, skill, and information to aspiring professionals without having so much money to give. The Republic Act 10931, known as the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, was signed into law in August 2017 by President Rodrigo Duterte, providing underprivileged Filipino students the opportunity to pursue college degrees through free education and exemption to other fees in state university colleges. In short, there is already access to free education. There is no reason why an aspiring president would not exert effort in acquiring knowledge through education because of this law. If someone really wants to be a leader who runs a country, it's not enough to have the passion, especially because the problems we have in today's time have become more and more complicated and even scientific. A great leader of today's generation would have to know how to plan, to anticipate events, knows how to use his power and his people, and most especially knows how to solve problems. Gone are the days wherein having a heart is enough for a leader to possess. The present situation of the country calls for the help of a leader who is not just passionate, but is intellectual. As to my second argument, the president is regarded as the sole organ and authority in external relations. Article 2, Section 7 of the Constitution states that the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. And its relations with other states, the paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. In the case of Pimentel versus the Office of the Executive Secretary, the Supreme Court said that the president, being the head of state, is regarded as the sole organ and authority in external relations and is the country's sole representative with foreign nations. As the chief architect of foreign policy, the president acts as the country's mouthpiece with respect to international affairs. Hence, the president is vested with the authority to deal with foreign states and governments, extend or withhold recognition, maintain diplomatic relations, enter into treaties, and otherwise transact the business of foreign relations. In the realm of treaty making, the president has the sole authority to negotiate with other states. Now you see, the president has the greatest responsibility in carrying the whole nation and its people, even our future. All the decisions of the president are not just about himself, but for the whole country. His powers are vast, and there are laws and international agreements that he or she has the sole discretion of making or entering into. So how can we trust our nation if the leader or the captain of the ship doesn't have the compass or has no idea how to save the ship? An appointive employee is even required to pass a board exam in addition to his or her being a college degree holder. Why is it that the president, who is holding so much power, can't be required to finish college? Do not give us the reason that education is anti-poor or that education is important, because we always claim that the Philippines is a developing country. Our problem in the present is different from the time the first constitution was made. If the standard given by the first constitution was the requirement to read and write, that was understandable since we were at war and education was not really a big deal. But now, giving college education or not giving college education as a requirement for a president is absurd. How would he or she decide on the country's problem? Is he going to rely on his lawyers and advisors? Then is he really the leader we want to have? A lost leader who is dependent on those who have their college education? How can we be proud of the development of our educational system, which we had spent billions to improve, when it is not manifested in our president himself? That is why, ladies and gentlemen, let us honor our country by giving the best leader we have. Let us choose a knowledgeable leader who is a role model so that we won't be lost ship just because of our lost shepherd. Again, good afternoon, everyone.
You're here. Now, to initiate the first engagement, Leader of the Opposition. You're here.
Thank you, sir. Abraham Lincoln once said, democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Taking from this, if college education becomes a requirement before a person can run for the position of the Philippine president, the essence of democracy in our country will be diminished. Honorable adjudicators, respected teachers, classmates, and fellow competitors, ladies and gentlemen, a cheerful afternoon to each and everyone. We in the opposition believe that a college degree should not be a requirement before a person can run for the position of the Philippine president. As the leader of the opposition, we will speak of the importance of our proposition. First is its necessity, second, its benefits, and lastly, its practicability. I will also present some arguments to counter the Prime Minister of the government. The opposition deputy leader will present additional arguments and defenses to support our claim. Opposition whip would also close our argument and summarize the debate from our side's perspective. However, to interpret our proposition, let me define some of the essential terminologies which we will use in our speeches. First, college education or college. According to Britannica, an online dictionary, college education is an education beyond the secondary level, especially education at college or university level. Second, prerequisite. According to Merriam-Webster, it means something that you officially must have or do before you can have or do something else. Third, the Philippine president, as provided under Section 1, Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution, holds the executive power of the government. He is the head of the state and the government and functions as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Philippines. Now, going back to our discussion, do we really need to change the current qualification of the Philippine president? Article 7, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution states that no person may be elected president unless he is the natural born citizen of the Philippines, a registered voter, able to read and write, at least 40 years of age on the day of the election, and a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding the election. Hence, simply defining the point that college education is not one of the qualifications set forth by the Constitution before a person could run for the highest position of this land. Our Constitution clearly defined that any person may run for the position of the Philippine president as long as he meets the necessary qualifications and none of these qualifications. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our Constitution which clearly supports our proposition. And let us not forget the doctrine of constitutional supremacy, where Justice Isagani Cruz eloquently expounded the essence of this doctrine when he mentioned that, and I quote, the Constitution is the basic and paramount law of which all other laws must conform, including the highest officials of this land must defer. No act shall be valid, however nobly intentioned, if it conflicts with the Constitution. The Constitution must ever be supreme, and all must bow to the mandate of this law. Thus, requiring a person to have a college education before running for the Philippine presidency is clearly unconstitutional. Now, let's proceed to the second point of our proposition. Is it beneficial for the people and the government to change the status quo? We beg to disagree. Article 3, Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution provides that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of laws. Equal protection of laws has been defined by Supreme Courts on its decisions, whereas equal protection simply requires that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to rights conferred and responsibilities imposed. Similar subjects, in other words, should not be treated differently so as to give undue favor to some and unjustly discriminate against others. College education as an additional qualification for presidency discriminates potential leaders who cannot afford tertiary education. It is undeniably anti-poor and violates the Equal Protection Clause. As Representative Rosana Vergara pointed out during a plenary debate on the implementation of educational requirement for public positions, and I quote, only 10% of the Filipinos in 2010 had college degrees, and yet it increased up to 36% this year because the recent implementation of the free tuition law. Thus, requiring college degree would disenfranchise almost 64% of our voters, narrowing the pool required simply because they do not have the college degree. It is also detrimental for the government because college education is not a guarantee for a better governance. Taking our country, for example, yes, we can see that almost all of our presidents in the Philippine history were college degree holders. But have we seen dramatic developments? Have we progressed from a third world country into first or even a second world country? Yes, we still belong to the third world country, sadly. Lastly, it is the proposition of the government is the proposition of the government legally practicable or doable? Definitely not. Requiring a person to get a college degree before running for the position of the Philippine president requires a constitutional amendment or even revision. Constitutional amendment is a very long process with small chances of being approved. The impracticability of the government's proposition is very apparent because there are no measures yet adopted or considered by the Filipino people to require a college education before a person can run for the position of the Philippine president. As presidential spokesperson, or former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque pointed out on his comments as translated in English, it is the right of every Filipino to run and be elected for any position in the government. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a democratic country. Limiting the criteria for a potential leader who are not fortunate enough to get college education is clearly anti-democratic. With that, sirs, ma'ams, I rest my case. Rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Before we move on to the next speaker, reminders, always take POIs. It will help in the long run. Okay, to build on the government's case, you may now take the floor, Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me walk you through our notion that we should raise the standard. To it, one must obtain at least a bachelor's degree to be eligible to run for the presidency. The opposition contends that the essence of democracy will be diminished. However, the issue at hand is not about the constitutionality and of democracy, but rather it is about the substantial necessity of a college-level educational attainment as a qualification of a presidential candidate, for in our points, it will be more advantageous, especially now that Philippines is a developing country. It is not anti-poor, because we have lost scholarships and even state universities available to encourage the masses to further education. To our dear educators, raising the standards for the seat of the presidency will not harm anybody. Nay, it will even be beneficial for the country. Allow me to state my arguments. First, the president should be knowledgeable of the laws implemented and the laws to be implemented in the country. Second, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. And third, the president has duties that go beyond what is written in the law. Hence, raising the qualification of a president is beneficial because he or she must know the gravity vested in the position. In my first acumen, the president should know the laws implemented and the laws to be implemented. Ignorantia juris non excusat, or ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith. This principle applies even to the ordinary citizen. One should know the rules and regulations set by law. However, in the case of the president, knowing the laws is not enough. One should know which laws to be passed are beneficial for the country. As provided in the Constitution, the president signs bills into laws. Every bill passed by Congress shall, before it becomes a law, be presented to the president, who has the power to approve it or veto it. In case of a veto, the bill will be sent back to Congress, where the rejection can be overturned by a vote of 2/3 of the House. So in this case, if you put someone who merely knows how to read and write, but is not knowledgeable of one's power in the realm of lawmaking, would that person really be qualified to become the president? Solely relying on political advisors and delegates is not enough, because the people voted him or her as president. If his or her power is dependent on other people's skills, it would seem as if the president that was voted for is a mere front rather than the head of the state. As clearly stated under Article 7 of the Constitution, that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the Philippines and not to his advisors. While it is a fact that under the Constitution, the President can delegate some of these powers, but there is a special class of powers that the President cannot delegate, which brings me to my second document. Section 18, Article 5 of the Constitution grants the President, as Commander-in-Chief, a sequence of graduated powers. These are the calling out power, the power to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, and the power to declare martial law. Now, in the case of Integrated Bar of the Philippines versus Zamora, the power of the President to keep the peace is not limited merely to exercising the Commander-in-Chief powers in times of emergency or to leading the state against external and internal threats to its existence. The President is not only clothed with extraordinary powers in times of emergency, but is also tasked with attending to the day-to-day problems of maintaining peace and order and ensuring domestic tranquility in times when no foreign foe appears on the horizon. When the President calls the armed forces to prevent or suppress lawless violence, invasion, or rebellion, he or she necessarily exercises a discretionary power solely vested in his or her wisdom. Now, for further analysis, the President is not only responsible for the safety and security of the country, but he or she is also responsible for the growth of our economy. One good example is the former President Joseph Estrada. He exploited his screen popularity and named himself the champion of the masses, and promised a government that would bring relief to the poor. The poor and the powerless supporters of Estrada were tenacious in their hope that their movie idol would deliver as he always did in his screen roles. But the role of the President is not a mere character. It is a vital role in society, for he is the head of the state, the representative of the people. When Estrada assumed office, even after a year in his seat, he had not passed a single economic reform measure to which he promised his fans and to those businessmen alongside him. It was even announced that the national budget deficit could rise to at least 130 billion, which is twice the targeted amount. The mammoth deficit, owing largely to poor revenue performance, caused devastating effects in the national economy. Estrada drifted into populism and was vulnerable to cronyism. Moreover, as commander-in-chief, it was also traumatic because of the senseless bombings and numerous kidnappings that disheartened the safety and security of the people, and not to mention his sweating scandals, which led to his unfortunate impeachment cases. Estrada was a man of charisma, but not of vision. As compared to other presidential candidates and other presidents who came before and after him, his faults stood large and his virtues were scarce. The cost of failed leadership is both severe and immediate. Hence, obtaining at least a bachelor's degree should be a prerequisite to be eligible to run for president in order to obtain good governance and a dynamic economy for the development and progression of the country. Lastly, the president has duties that go beyond what is written in the law. Executive Order 292 provides for the residual power of the president, and it was even illustrated in the case of Marcos versus Manglapos. The Supreme Court said that it cannot be denied that the president upon whom executive power is vested has unstated residual powers, which are implied from the grant of executive power and which are necessary for him or her to comply with his or her duties under the Constitution. The powers of the president are not the powers of the president are not limited to what are expressly enumerated in the article regarding the executive department and in the scattered provisions of the Constitution. Thus, while the powers of the president are expressly stated in law, their influence goes beyond it. He or she wields influence on political bodies and to his or her constituents. There is a need to further educational attainment because the powers are so grave that we should be wary of the qualification of the presidents, because this is to make sure that such powers were exercised with permissible constitutional limits. Seeking for raising the standard will create a solid political system that will give the president ample influence at the national and international levels. The political fence will be based on a solid foundation that will be beneficial for the country. Raising the qualification of a president is crucial because he or she must know the gravity vested in the position. Thus, the House believes that a college education should be a prerequisite qualification in order to run for the position of Philippine president. That is all, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon.
You're here. Now, in defense of the opposition stance, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Here, here.
Thank you. Now, as the leader of the opposition, let me support the arguments presented by the leader of the opposition and refute the arguments of the government-sized deputy prime minister. So it has been settled well by our leader of the opposition that college education should not be a prerequisite before a person can run for the position of the Philippine president. Because first, it is not a constitutional requirement. The Constitution clearly established the criteria for presidency as set forth in Section 2, Article 7 of the Philippine Constitution. There is nothing in our fundamental law which necessitates aspiring potential leaders to get a college education first before he could actually run for the presidential post. What the Constitution merely requires is that he is able to read and write. Apparently, expanding the qualifications for the position of the Philippine president is not the true intention of the framers of the Constitution, for it would violate the Equal Protection Clause duly embedded in our Supreme Law. Section 1, Article 3 of the Bill of Rights states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. As emphasized in the case of Quinto versus Comelec, the equal protection of the law clause is against undue favor and individual or class privilege, as well as hostile discrimination or the oppression of inequality. Furthermore, long line of Supreme Court decisions pointed out that equal protection requires that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to the rights conferred or to the responsibilities imposed. It requires public bodies and institutions to treat similarly situated individuals in a similar manner. The purpose of the equal protection is to secure every person within a state's jurisdiction against intentional and arbitrary discrimination, whether occasioned by the express terms of statute or by its improper execution through the state's duly constituted authorities. In other words, the concept of equal justice under the law requires the state to govern impartially, and it may not draw distinctions between individuals solely on differences that are irrelevant to a legitimate governmental objective. In this case, distinction pertains to those people with college education and to those who don't have one. Third, Section 26 of Article 2 of the Philippine Constitution provides that the state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service. Article 21, paragraphs 1, 2, 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to equal access to public service in his country. Paragraph C, Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights states that every citizen shall have the right and the opportunity without any distinctions maintained in Article 2 and without unreasonable restrictions to have access on general terms of equality to public service in his country. Take note, equal access to opportunities for public service. Now tell me if equal access will still be available if we will expand the qualifications for presidency. Obviously, not anymore, because it will prevent those aspiring potential leaders to run due to the fact that they were not fortunate enough to get a college education. Where is fairness and justice in the government side's proposition? I couldn't find one. Now, let's take into account the benefits of the government side's proposition. Is it really beneficial to require college education as a prerequisite for Philippine president? We in the opposition strongly believe that college education is not at all an absolute requirement for the presidential post. Expanding the qualifications for president in a country like Philippines, where illiteracy rate is high as of today's survey, will go much against the spirit of democracy for the sole reason that it will deprive the majority of the population the right to contest election. A good politician must be a good leader first, who can take good decisions, empathize with people, have a vision for the future, and of course, must know the way to get there. It doesn't really matter if the person who owns some degree or not. What matters is his love for the nation. The person should be honest, patriot, and devoted to the country. And unfortunately, there is no such degree bestowed for exhibiting these qualities. Now, let us come to present scenario where we have highly qualified legislature of MPAs, MBAs certified from around the world's best universities, from Harvard, like our past presidents earned law degrees in very in very good law schools in the country and eventually became members of the IBP, economist leaders, political analysts with postgraduate degrees. But let me remind you that most of them have their best foot forward in all corruption and suppression of democratic processes. Let's take, for example, the ever famous Philippine lawyer president who became the head of the state from 1966 to 1986. And 1986, former President Ferdinand Marcos, who established an authoritarian regime in the Philippines that came under criticism for corruption and for its suppression of democratic processes. Another, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who earned master's degree in economics from Ateneo de Manila University and a doctorate in economics from the University of the Philippines, but was known for the Hello Garcia scandal, which was a political scandal, an electoral crisis in the country, which involved former President Gloria, who allegedly rigged 2004 national election in her favor. Ladies and gentlemen, can't you see that our nation is now fed up of people with high academicity, yet all we want is people with honesty, integrity, and commitment? Fourth, let me emphasize that leadership doesn't require you to obtain a college degree or formal education. There are many leaders around the world who never completed college. Some of them never completed grade school. Say, for example, Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest American presidents who never attended college but made a lot of contributions not only for America but the entire world. George Washington, first American president, commander of the Continental Army. This only shows that college education is never a guarantee for good or better governance. It doesn't mean that only educated people are intelligent. The real qualification needed for politicians is to have a practical knowledge and ability to make quality decisions. Obviously, the government side forgot the fact that we are living in a democratic country where we can freely run for public office despite the fact that we were not able to get a college education. That is one of the essence of democracy which our constitution protects. This house only upholds the basic tenets of the constitution of the democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not deny our countrymen the chance to dream just because they lack college education. We in the opposition hope that these people are still able to dream of serving others, not just as president, as a representative, a senator, a vice president, or even the lowest position of the government. Because what we are looking for in a leader more than being smart is honesty, humility, love of country, and the desire to serve without asking for anything in return. By that, I rest my case.
You're here. Okay. To settle for the government, the floor is yours, Government Whip. Here.
Respected educators, fellow debaters, RMCSOL students, ladies and gentlemen of this virtual event, a pleasant afternoon. I'll be giving an in-depth analysis as to why the government side stood out in this debate. The following are the arguments of the opposition. First, is it necessary to have this proposition for a requirement or to require a college degree for the position of the president? Well, you argued no, but for us, it's a yes. Remember, we do not negate the democratic participation, democratic right and constitutional right of every Filipino people to participate in politics. However, your argument is tantamount in saying that there is no way for us to add something to the Constitution. And later on, I'll discuss further my analysis on this case. And on the beneficiality of our proposition, you argue that it's anti-poor. If you just listen well to the arguments of the first two speakers of our bench, we have this Universal Access to Tertiary Education Act, and it was signed by President Duterte. It was so clear it's not anti-poor. You just have to work hard in order for you to attain educational college degree. And to the idea also that it is not doable, it's not applicable. Well, it's yes. It's clearly illustrated in the case of Lambina versus Comelec, the case regarding amendments and revision of the Constitution. Remember, as the preamble would say, we are the author of the Constitution, and we also have this capacity to add something and to make it better Constitution for the land. Okay, and to have a speech further, the government side provided better paradigm as to why college education should be a prerequisite qualification to run for the position of the president. I will justify why the arguments raised by the brilliant first two speakers of our bench are much better compared to that of the opposition. First, who provided debatable argument in lieu of the parameter given? The brilliant first speaker of the affirmative provided arguments which are supported by significant studies on the importance of education in the aspect of leadership. Given the roles and function of a president, a wider horizon of reality and mindfulness of its implication have to be embedded in the life of a leader. As clearly illustrated by the second speaker of our bench, a president will stand to implement laws, the sole architect of foreign affairs, commander in chief of the military, and has duties to go beyond what is written in the law. With such fundamental functions, in depth educational attainment is hereby demanded. Plato, a great thinker and teacher in ancient Greece, introduced the idea of a philosopher king in his book, The Republic, Book 7. That is, a king should be knowledgeable, assertive to the demands of the reality, and has qualities worthy of leading a state or a country. It is noteworthy to bear in mind that the idea of Plato was introduced in the year 380 before Christ era and serve as springboard of kings and rulers in Western tradition. Thus, the world has become unmindful as to what history taught us. Speaking of history, let us consider what our country had become in the hands of Aguinaldo and Estrada, as discussed by the second speaker of our bench. They were let us be proactive in upgrading standards for the president. There's no need for us to wait for problematic status quo in order for us to initiate additional standards and qualification for the position of the president. Second, while it is clear that the parameter is set by the affirmative bench, that is, we do not dwell on the constitutionality of the provision under Article 7, Section 2 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which prescribes qualification of the president. And since issues in this matter prevail in the argument of the opposition, then let's take it here. The provision on the qualification of presidents state that we stand to upgrade the standards of our leaders. As stated in the preamble, we are the authors of the Constitution. Sovereign power resides in all of us. Thus, we are challenged to upgrade our system as the signs of the times demanded us. In the case of Lambina versus Comelec, amendments and revision in the provision of the constitutions are recognized. Hence, we can amend or revise the Constitution in order to make our proposition constitutional. Third, the paradigm that our bench provided is a way better than that of the opposition. Imagine this. The opposition would want to put the future of our country in the hands of a puppet, gone, or worse, to someone who doesn't give importance to education. The message that the opposition team is sending in this debate to young generation is that it is okay not to take your education seriously, since you can still become a president. When in fact, their message is unrealistic and totally anti-education. Their message in this debate will put the future of young generation in jeopardy, since they're encouraging them not to finish their degree. Thus, we from the government side clearly illustrated why the president should have college degree, as established by the first two speakers of our bench. The president should lead by example. Fourth, as established by the first two brilliant speakers of our bench, the job of a president is not simple. It is not simple. Listening to the argument raised by the opposition, they somehow failed to consider how crucial and challenging the job as the president of our country is. There is a lack of acknowledgement on their part as to the grave effect of every decision a president makes. They are somehow framing this debate that a president is only leading a certain classroom. But I'm telling the opposition side that a president is leading a country and every citizen of this country is his responsibility. Thus, a college degree is just a minimum requirement, and the opposition side failed to present any compelling argument as to why we should not adopt the proposition. With all the arguments raised by the government side in this debate, to which the opposition side failed to provide worthy rebuttals, it highlighted a loophole in the Constitution that is about time that we hold those people who are seeking to run as president to a high standard, which is reasonable and fair. Reasonable in a sense that it is not impossible to comply. As argued by first speaker, we have Republic Act 10931, known as Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, It is fair in a sense that an ordinary citizen will apply for a certain job these days. A college degree is a must. What more to a position of president than requiring a candidate to have college degree before
7 minutes. Speaker spoke for 7 minutes. Sakto tama ba, Robert? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, good afternoon.
Okay, here. Now, crystallizing for the opposition bench, opposition whip. Here.
Thank you, sir. Let me give you 5 points why the government side should win this debate. First, the leader of the opposition was able to defend and interpret the motion and develop the case for our proposition. The necessity, benefits, and practicability of our motion has been presented in a reasonable fashion. We fully emphasize the provision in the Constitution to support our claim that college education should not be a prerequisite to run for Philippine president because primarily it is not a constitutional requirement. I would like to reiterate that the qualifications for presidency have been laid down in Article 7, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution for the longest time, and expanding the qualifications for the president post is not the intent of the framers of the Constitution because it is an obvious discrimination to those people who wasn't able to get a college degree. The government side forgot the fact that we need to uphold the constitutional supremacy that unless otherwise Article 17 of the Constitution has been invoked by amendment or revision, the Constitution must ever remain supreme and all must bow to the mandate of this law. Second, the leader of the opposition was able to present the compelling reasons why there is a need to maintain the status quo. I would like to reiterate that we need to maintain the status quo because expanding the qualifications for presidency would violate the Equal Protection Clause duly embedded in the express provision of the Constitution, particularly Article 3, Section 1 of the Bill of Rights, that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. Settled is the rule that the equal protection requires that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to rights conferred and responsibilities imposed, which the government side fully neglected. Third, the deputy leader of the opposition was able to lay down all the arguments necessary to support our claim. Unlike the government side, we presented arguments with fairness and justice through the provisions of the Constitution we defended, and emphasized the concept of equal justice under the law requires the state to govern impartially, and it may not draw distinctions between individuals solely on differences that are irrelevant to a legitimate governmental objective. In this case, distinction pertains to those people with college education and those who don't have one. As stated by the deputy, Section 26 of Article 2 provides, the state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service. Let us take note the phrase equal access to opportunities for public service. How can we even maintain this concept if we will consider and adopt the proposition of the government side? We cannot even find fairness and justice in their arguments. Fourth, I fully support the claim of the deputy leader of the opposition that the arguments of the government side are not beneficial for the government and the people. We know that rate of the people with college education in our country has been very low since the very beginning because of poverty and other compelling reasons. Good thing that it is increasing by the time pre-tuition law has been implemented. Thus, expanding the qualifications for president in a country like Philippines where illiteracy rate is high as of today's survey will go much against the spirit of democracy for the sole reason that it will deprive the majority of the population the right to contest elections. Why do we need to limit the chances for the people who want to serve the country but were not fortunate enough to get a college education? Seems like the government side supports and the anti-poor advocates in their campaign to prevent those potential leaders of our country who don't have any college education to serve as the Filipino people with sincerity, integrity, and love of country. Fifth, let us settle that the fact that leadership does not require you to obtain a college degree or formal education. The deputy leader of the position was able to cite different leaders around the world who don't have any college education but made the greatest contributions not only in their respective countries but the entire world. Yes, almost our presidents in the Philippine history are professionals, but does this make any difference? Ladies and gentlemen, we need a president who is a good leader who can take good decisions, empathize with people, and have a vision for the future. Having a degree doesn't really matter. It's only an addition to these featured qualities which matters most is his love for the nation. My fellow Filipino people, let us not choose to educate our leaders. Rather, we should educate ourselves to choose the best leaders for us because after all, it's the performance in the office that tells the tale, not the qualifications. The presence or absence of a college degree make a statement, but it is limited statement, and that statement has to be in context with an individual's life and life story. We have working society following a rule of law even without college degree as a prerequisite for elective officials. The spirit of democracy is alive despite lack of college degree for some leaders in the past and present and future. We, the opposition, should win this debate simply because we were able to present all of our arguments comprehensively with fairness and justice. By that, I rest my case.
Here, here. Now, to consolidate for the opposition with her reply speech, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Here, here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we in the opposition strongly believes that college education should not be a prerequisite to run for the Philippine president. Our contentions are centered on pure facts that college education is not a constitutional requirement. Expanding the qualifications for the position is tantamount to violation of the basic tenets of democracy, for it would violate the freedom of a person to run for public office due to the fact that he lacks college education, which our constitution duly protects. It is also a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. Drawing lines between persons with college education and those who don't have one is not treating every Filipino people similarly, both as to the rights conferred and responsibilities imposed. Not only the Philippine Constitution, but also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, where the Philippines is signatory, guarantees equal access to opportunities for public service. If we will make expansion on the criteria for presidency, it is not giving equal access to opportunities for public service anymore. The true intention of the framers of the Constitution will now be put in question. Now, the law only mandates that every Filipino people must enjoy freedom, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of the press, and even the freedom to run for the position of Philippine president. So, how sure are you that subjects and trainings that were taught in college can really help a person the true values of leadership? Let me remind you that there are no studies yet proven that a person with college education tends to become a great leader than those who don't have one. Ladies and gentlemen, upgrading upgrading is similar to expanding. It is obvious enough that they want to expand the qualifications set forth by the fundamental law. Applying for a job is highly different from running for presidency, same as appointed position is highly different from elective position. It is neither a guarantee that a person with college education is a good planner and decision taker, nor a guarantee for a better or good governance. What matters most is his love for our country. So, why do we judge people on the basis of their qualification? Why not according to their nature, their qualities, and work done by them? A person who aspires to be Philippine president should be well aware of his responsibilities for the country and should have the following requisites. First, he should be honest, patriot, and devoted to the country. He should have good leadership and always think and work for the welfare of the public. He must be a good decision maker so that he can bring changes to the country. Ladies and gentlemen, we in the opposition strongly believes that education is not a prerequisite to run for Philippine president. What we are trying to prove here is that subject knowledge and hard skills don't determine whether he is suitable to Philippine president or not. We are not saying that a person should not be educated. We are not anti-education. The above mentioned qualities are sufficient for president and not any paper certifying his education. We are living in a democratic country where we can freely run for public service despite the fact that we were not able to get a college education. That is one of the essence of democracy. which our Constitution protects. This House only upholds the basic tenets of democracy. Let us give who won what is due to who won, even if he lacks education, because at the end of the day, a true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and compassion to listen to the needs of others. By that, I rest my case.
Thank you, Speaker. Here. For the final review, Prime Minister with his reply speech. Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for us to manifest the change that we long to have. We cannot move forward. We cannot go with the flow of development when we are still stuck in the past. The previous constitutions may have worked in the past, but given today's circumstances and problems, is it clearly not enough that we would settle for a leader who just wants the position? Anyone can be a president, but not everyone can do a president's job. How unfair would it be if we would require Filipino citizens to finish college to have work, but we're just going to let someone run for presidency just because he or she is able to read and write? Yes, it's a decision of the people who they want to vote. Of course, obviously, we fought for that kind of republic. However, we cannot accept that having this college degree requirement is contrary to the provision on equal access to opportunities for public service. For Pete's sake, have you applied for a government position? Have you known an appointed employer? Have you been one? Have you seen the requirements? Can you also say that it is contrary to the constitutional provision on equal access to opportunities for public service? The only difference is that government employees are screened, interviewed, and hired by their bosses. If we actually think of it, it still needs the votes of the boss or the bosses to hire the employee or not. On the other hand, look at an aspiring president. The boss who will vote is the people. And have you seen the requirements under Section 2, Article 7 of the Constitution? A natural born citizen of the Philippines, registered voter, able to read and write at least 40 years of age on the day of election, and the resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding the election. Again, are we going to settle for that? This House already explained that the president is the most important person in the country. It is evident how the people need a president and how people look for the president, especially problematic times. It's a norm for the people to say, where is the president, or what can a president do in order to give us back our West Philippine Sea, or how can the president resolve this pandemic? Obviously, all problems of our country are given way to the president because his role is not simple as the qualification enlisted under the Constitution. The president runs the country and not his political advisors and lawyers. Well, having political advisors for a president actually shows how important having knowledge for a president is. The opposition contends that having a college education as a requirement would diminish democracy. The opposition obviously didn't listen to our argument that our contention does not intend to infringe any right of the Filipino people. The constitutionality of the present argument is not the issue at hand, since we could always revise or amend our constitution, especially if it benefits the Filipino people. I would like to emphasize the argument of this House that the opposition failed to rebut. In Pamatong versus Comelec, the state has a compelling interest to ensure that its electoral exercises are rational, objective, and orderly. The state takes into account the practical considerations in conducting elections. The privilege may be subjected to limitations. It's not absolute. That's why the COMELEC cancels certificates of candidacy of nuisance candidates, right? As mentioned, almost all our presidents have educational degrees. Those who run without any degrees tend to be nuisance candidates. Shouldn't we just formally adapt education as a prerequisite since it's already practiced? Democracy isn't actually disputable at this point. This is just a push for an aspiring president to know more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I am begging you to see. To be better, let's face it, we need a president who is passionate and intellectual. Let's not entrust ourselves and the future of the next generation to someone who isn't even sure what he or she make us bloom. Let's choose to be better because it's always a need for the country and for the Filipino people. Once again, a pleasant afternoon and have a nice day.
Here. Wow, plenty of quotable moments. Yeah, I think I can speak for everyone here when I say that round was intense. Both teams were on fire and not a single speaker skipped a beat. Now, I personally, I've seen my fair share of debates in my time so far, yet even after witnessing all of them, it still remains to be a pleasurable experience seeing bright and rambunctious individuals hurling arguments, setting up defenses, and taming reason with a fervor as grand as life itself. I'm sure we all have our winners. Mga personal natin mga choices at this point. But let's keep our choices to ourselves for now. The final arbiters of this glorious bout have yet to render their adjudication. On that note, while they recluse themselves to a breakout room to deliberate, I'd like to call everyone, I'd like everyone to turn on their cameras as we will be conducting the first Zoom fee, as Walbert calls it, Zoom fee of the event. Walbert, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ronan. So if I may request for Miss Marian to open her camera for our participants to have a documentation for this. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Smile. Thank you so much.
Okay. Now, my breakout room, right, Robert? Okay. So in a few moments, our time will be allocated to unfasten the straps over a historic happening. We are about to witness history in the making, folks. Now, I'm sure many of you may have already heard or have an inkling as to what jurisprudencia is. In a nutshell, it is a student-run law journal of the Rizal Memorial College's School of Law, which aims to promote legal and academic discourses in Philippine laws and prevailing jurisprudence. And we shall witness in a few moments its official virtual launch. However, that's all I have actually. And if I'm left to talk more about it, I wouldn't be able to do it justice. Hence why I shall now give the floor to our dear Assistant Dean, who is as ravishing as she is prodigious, Attorney Marian Castillo Pasha, to tell us more about this much awaited launch.
Thank you, Ronan, for the kind introduction. The motion for this afternoon's debate is that college education should be a prerequisite qualification in order to run for the position of Philippine President. And the recurrent concern raised is that the requirement will be restrictive given the lack of access to education. I will leave to the adjudicators later to discuss the merits of the arguments, but I just wish to say that yes, lack of access to education has been a perennial problem. And that is why RMC has been established. Attorney Maria Veronica Manalo, Attorney Daniel Gaite, and Attorney Arvin Paulo Cortez, and other honored guests, students, good afternoon. In the 1940s, Justice Leopoldo Abellera, who was a young lawyer then, had a vision to address the issue on access to quality education among the students in Davao who could not afford to study outside. Thus, in April 5, 1948, Justice Abellera, together with his friends, founded the Rizal Memorial Colleges that offered law as one of its inaugural degree programs, making RMC as a pioneer of legal and Batacan had thus on July 3, 2017, despite it being a gargantuan task, the RMC School of Law was here open to provide inclusive quality legal education to aspiring lawyers in Davao. In 2020, at the height of the public health emergency that challenged our educational environment, the students had a vision to establish organizations in the pursuit of self-actualization and community service on the basis of similar interests, causes, and advocacies. Thus, at around this time last year, Diyalogo, or the debate, mood, and public speaking organization of the RMC School of Law was born. And in addition, a couple of months after that, the Law Journal team was also established. Today, a year into the establishment, the Diyalogo is celebrating their anniversary by sharing their knowledge, experiences, and victory through this Rizalian Cup. And the Law Journal editorial board is launching today also the premier volume of Jurisprudencia, the RMC Law Journal. Like the visions of Justice Abellera and Dean Batacan, the efforts to organize these organizations were all well meaning. Like the tasks of Justice Abellera and Dean Batacan, the task to organize was also gargantuan. However, like Justice Abellera and Dean Batacan, the students were able to do it. Thus, on behalf of Dean and the entire administration and academic community of RMC, I would like to thank and congratulate Diyalogo and the Law Journal editorial board for continuing the legacy of the fathers of our academic institution, for a job greatly, passionately, and diligently done. This thanksgiving and commendations come with the hope and the prayer that your organizations may continue to reach new heights and that you may continue to inspire your fellow students to have similar trajectories, that you may all develop and maximize your potentials in ways that are both individually rewarding and socially relevant. Or as our battle cry puts it, pursue excellence, service, and justice for God and country. Once again, thank you very much, Padayon.
Thank you so much, Attorney, for your words of insight. And now a video message from the Jurisprudencia Editorial Board and Managing Board.
Good afternoon, everyone. Locally referred to as the Great Migration to RMC Sol. Many, if not majority, of the students attending this Zoom session today are transferees, including myself. So many people would ask, what draws students to a newly re-established law school? My answer is represented by the cover of Jurisprudential Volume 1. The cover has two aspects. The first one is represented by a collage of the historical foundations of RMC Sol and its current roster of formidable law professors who are experts in their respective legal fields. And RMC Sol's efforts to set such a high standard for its faculty lineup and at the same time its policy to offer very reasonable fees show a genuine commitment to providing legal education based on quality and equity. And many of our law professors also go beyond their ways to serve the law school community, such as the commitment and support of attorney Veronica Manalo to Diyalogo, and our very own fiscal Robbie Razon, our faculty advisor for the Law School Journal, and attorney Noreen Manata Dillon, the faculty advisor of the SSG and the bar operations team. And of course, our deans, Dean Ed Batacan and Dean Marian Castillo Pasha, for a very compassionate administration while maintaining a culture of excellence and camaraderie in RMC Sol. All of these figures continue the legacy which Justice Leopoldo Abellera, our founder, has initiated. The second aspect of the cover is the list of contributors. This volume proudly is all written by RMC Sol students from different year levels, not just students, working students. RMC Sol's pride in its diligent working students and the law school's dedication to serve the country are embodied in this table of contents. Jurisprudencia would like to discuss the most recent legal issues besetting our country, from COVID-19 to the deep fake technology, from abortion to the indigenous people's rights. And so let me thank the following contributors for patiently and efficiently going through the review process of the Law Journal. Ria Valdez and Ange Vidal, Ace Barton, Rio Corrales, Bel Maturan, and Nicoy Akailar. Thank you so much for the contributions. And lastly, we would like to invite all RMC Sol students to participate in maintaining Jurisprudencia's relevance by submitting more papers on timely legal topics concerning our communities and our country. Thank you so much.
Stephen King once said, "The scariest moment is always just before you start. After that, things can only get better." Good afternoon, everyone. If I may backtrack a bit, our first Law Journal week dated August 1 to 6, 2021 was a huge success. Though the members of the team were neophytes in the field, we had organized it well. We even managed to invite prominent speakers. To name a few, we had Attorney Jenny Domino, Legal Advisor, International Commission of Jurists, Myanmar, Commissioner Kelvin Lester Lee of the Securities and Exchange Commission, former Regional State Prosecutor Antonio Arellano, who even made a professorial lecture on law on arrest, search, and seizure, and Professor Fe Tagaytay, Communications Lecturer and Researcher of the University of Southeastern Philippines, or USEP. These speakers helped us understand the intricacies of making an actual law journal vis-a-vis mastering our legal English skills. We also conducted an on-the-spot essay writing contest entitled "The Relevance of Legal Profession in the Modern Times," participated by more or less 10 students. It was a week intended to harness the critical thinking and writing skills of RMC Sol students. Indeed, time flies so fast. With the help of the current RMC Law Journal editorial and managing boards, our pioneer law journal has become a reality. This success is a perfect example on how RMC law students practice teamwork, accountability, and diligence. A special mention to Miss Gwen Alcantara, an architecture student of UP Mindanao who did a meticulous layouting of the journal. On behalf of the RMC Law Journal Managing Board, I would like to personally thank Dean Batakan, Attorney Pasha, and Attorney Razon for the unfathomable and constant support during the establishment of our organization up to the present. It all started with a short message in the GC encouraging us to organize a law journal team. Now we finally have a finished product. Initially, we only had 5 people in the team, yet today, the members have climbed up to 23 people and counting. So I hope that the theme, continuing the legacy, would inspire the law students to keep the momentum and to continue seeking for excellence while achieving great things in the RMC School of Law community. I thank.
Wow. Well, we'll be expecting great things from Jurisprudencia. At this juncture, let us allow ourselves to relax for a bit and indulge in the musical stylings of a Diyalogo Debate Club member and the very talented Pamela. What a talent. Okay, and now the moment we've all been waiting for, the final adjudication. Now, each adjudicator will relay his or her verdict, beginning with Attorney Gaite, followed by Attorney Cortez, and then finally by Attorney Manalo. Honorable adjudicators, you may now have the floor.
Thank you, Ronan. I understand that I will be giving my adjudicatory speech first. All right, thank you. So, good afternoon again, everyone. I wish to first thank Diyalogo for inviting me to this event and for giving me the honor of listening to both teams as well as adjudicating and listening to your very well thought of arguments. In general, I found that this was a very engaging and exciting round because both teams were able to coherently and clearly express the arguments that they wish to convey. I also wish to congratulate everyone for the very zealous and very passionate advocacy that they showed, as well as the time management and adherence to the rules of the competition. So, for that, both teams are already winners to me. So, please give yourselves a round of applause. Virtual, of course. So while I note that there was very zealous advocacy, I would also want to observe that no one took points of information. But I would like to talk about more of that later because right now I just want to give some general comments and points for each of the speakers and what I think they can do to further improve. I understand that everyone is a novice debater here, and really it's been a pleasure to watch you, considering that everyone's a novice, has a lot of room to improve, and maybe can stir up their passions for this and learn more about debating and hopefully join more competitions within and outside the law school. So first, let's discuss Angelou, the Prime Minister. I especially appreciate how you set the premise and how you were able to say that this is not about constitutionality, this is about being better, being able to upgrade, being able to raise our standards in governance. And this was a theme that was ably carried out by Rose and Marlon. So government was able to show coherently that that was the whole theme of your presentation. So that is good. However, if there's one thing that I would want you to, I also appreciate your command of the manner and the method that you showed very clear and concise. But I want to point out that, for example, a president does not have the sole responsibility of negotiating treaties because, for example, under international law, in particular the Articles on State Responsibility, if, for example, a head of state is able to delegate or even give authority to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs or any other official under his or her cabinet, then they would also have that delegated authority to act on behalf of the state. But I really admire your advocacy, your manner, the way that you were able to make parallelisms with civil service and ordinary government employees. I think it's a very big frustration among us that why does the president require so little while we all struggle to get jobs, we struggle to get internships, we struggle to see people in public service who just want to keep their CSEs and their CESOs. So there. But for your final review, I also want to caution you against using words like "for Pete's sake" or obviously not listening because these are words which I understand in the heat of the moment get said and we don't mean it, but it might be a minus points from your adjudicator, but and also from the person that you want to convey that to. So, at the end of the day, although passions always run high, we should treat everyone with respect and equality as this is a small debating community. And even when you compete outside, kayo-kayo rin yung magpapakita. So, let's treat everyone with respect. Bardagulan, but classy. So, there. So, let's go to Rose, the MP. For the second speaker, what I really admire how you were able to address all the incorrect premises and reiterate that it's not constitutionality, it's the standards being raised. So it's a good reframing of what the LO tried to also reframe the issues at, and also showing that there are powers that the commander-in-chief really cannot delegate. So that hammered home your point that as president, you really need to be a step up in your education because there's a lot of things that you can't delegate. And I think that's something that a lot of us would understand. So I think that while you were very good at developing that point, you could have also gone on to discuss more things because I think you were very focused on one topic. When I think as a member of parliament or the member of government, you could do more in terms of substantiating and bringing in new matters because as MP, unlike a British parliamentary, you don't have the third speaker to further develop the points. So as MP, I think that responsibility devolves onto you to further develop and bring new matters. But that said, I really like the counterpoints that you made with the LO and this line where you said that uh, Joseph Estrada had charisma but not vision because I think this is really a fault among say populist leaders that yes they have the charisma, yes they have the following, but they don't have a vision that could be brought on by say higher education or a greater understanding of the world around them. So given your short time, great zingers and punchlines. Lastly, for government, Marlon, the government whip. I also think you had a very good summary of rebutting why and showing that you were much better. But when you mean that you're much better, you don't have to constantly say that you were way better, much better, or uh, did your best because this is debate. This is show. Yes, you have to tell, but more than telling, you have to show and not to tell. So the significance of all these studies are great. You were not able to raise any new matters, which I think is also tantamount for a government whip. So instead of that, you went into why a philosopher king is needed. And that is a very good closing for government because I think the whole philosophy of government goes back to the Platonic ideal of what a statesman should be. So good on everyone for being able to coherently and consistently adhere to that thought. I think a point for improvement for you is that you knew that your time was up. So time management again is a great thing because you don't want to keep extending because that affects your manner and your method and that will affect how you speak because you know you're rushing to get to the end. So learn to end gracefully. By way of example, what I do when I run out of time is that uh, your Excellencies or Your Honors or members of the adjudicating panel, my time is up. And with that, I end my submissions. I now turn you over to the opposition whip for his or her. So I guess there's also a semblance of grace or a certain rhetorical flourish that you can do to address time management issues. Okay, so for the opposition, let's go to the leader of opposition, Ricardo. I think you were the most structured among the speakers because you were able to say this is our stance necessity, proportionality, beneficiality, and you were able to show everyone that this is what I'm arguing, this is the scope of what the next speaker is arguing, and this is what the next speaker is also arguing. So I think that's very clear and helps with the judges considering that you have very little time and you don't have visual aids and you're also constrained by a screen. So these non-verbal cues which would usually alert the adjudicators as to how the structure of your speech will be are not as easily seen on in a virtual presentation as compared to a face-to-face presentation. So however, I guess one thing that I want you to improve on is working within a certain premise because the prime minister of course has the way of doing will be the one to set the premises and the definitions within the debate. And your job is either to follow them or to destroy them at the outset and say, no, that is not the correct goalposts. These are the parameters that we should be working on. But otherwise, I think the difficulty of being part of the opposition is that you have to work within these constraints and you're not sure what exactly the government will be proposing. So I guess there's a bit of flexibility that we need, and there's a balance between being flexible but also being able to show that this is the parameters that we should be working on. So, but that said, I like how you argued practicability because it's really, really difficult to get a constitutional amendment, and you would know that from the experience and from how news is. Now let's go to member of the opposition, Marian. I think you were very good at supporting the points of your LO and making sure that all his points actually got across and rehabilitating them. I also appreciated how you were able to bring in international law sources and show that this is not just a local issue, but this is also a human rights issue because participatory governance is not a Filipino thing. It's a universal thing. So I appreciate that that was brought in. But I wanted to be more careful, of course, about your citation of facts. By way of example, you said that we have low literacy, but I wouldn't say that that's exactly true because if you look at the current statistics, in terms of nominal literacy, will go to the high or mid 90s. But in terms of functional literacy, that's around mid to high 80s. So you have to be careful of those things because that could be raised as a point against you, whether by another speaker or by me as an adjudicator, for example. But I also appreciate what you said about there is no degree for exhibiting these qualities. So it speaks a lot about your wit and your quickness of mind to be able to bring in language like that, especially in just 7 minutes. So there. I also want you to be careful about name dropping examples, schools, institutions, because you're not always sure about the affiliations of your adjudicator. So, for example, you said that, oh, someone is from Georgetown or an economics graduate. You might not know if you're offending, say, someone from Georgetown or an economist in the crowd. So, again, treating everyone with equality and respect, notwithstanding the fact that you're being a very passionate advocate about your causes. So there. That's it for Marian. And lastly, for opposition whip, Bobbit. I think you were very good at saying that the government should win, but your opposition, Mr. Speaker. So the opposition should win. So let's not play both sides, as you know what your line was. So I think you also had good structure. You were able to acknowledge everyone in the team and their contributions, and I think that speaks loudly about your character as a speaker. That you were able to take note of everyone, especially considering you have the least time to prepare because you also have to address the points of the government whip. So there. Be careful as well of your body language because that is even more magnified on camera. So if someone is using their hands or not very still in front of the camera, especially when you're on spotlight, that's something that can easily be seen. So there. Lastly, before I let everyone go, and I hope I haven't been boring you with my very long adjudication speech, just a little word on POIs because I note that not many raised them and not many took them. But a POI is an art and a science. Because just like in court practice, we hear everyone saying objection, your honor. That objection is not just substantive, but also is a strategic point because it's not just something that you can use to distract an opponent or to bring down their points, but also to rehabilitate your own arguments. And I think it takes a very special way of thinking, a certain quickness on your feet, and a mastery of a subject matter to, for example, rehabilitate your own argument. Like, for example, one point that was made was that um, negotiation is for example, negotiation was supposedly something that can only be done by a president. For example, the LO or anyone from the opposition side could have said, but um, Madam Prime Minister, isn't this something that you could delegate to your other members of the government? So isn't this a matter of just hiring better people instead of putting in qualifications such as college education? So, it's also a way of reframing the debate. So your POIs should not just be a means of attacking, but also a means of rehabilitating and getting your point across. But of course, when you do so, always do so respectfully and in good faith because you don't want to be known as someone who does nuisance POIs. And considering the debate society is very small, your reputation as a debater also depends on this. So, there. Um, Congratulations to everyone. I really appreciate the efforts that you showed today, and thank you for having me. I hope these comments help, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have questions or POIs. Thank you.
Next, we have Attorney Ivan Paulo Cortez.
Thank you, Attorney Sescon. I'll call you Attorney Sescon already kasi as I've said 2 weeks ago, I look forward in considering you as our fellow brothers and sisters in the profession in the few years to come. Attorney Manalo, Attorney Pasha, Attorney Gaite, the members of the government and the opposition side of the first Rizalian Cup Championship round, students, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Allow me to give you a brief, my brief comments. I'll promise to make this short but sweet. Diba? So first of all, allow me to congratulate the members of both the government and the opposition side in arguing their case. I joined the observations of Attorney Gaite, and I personally acknowledge that the issue which confronted both parties in this case is a sensitive issue, and it is actually a hotly contested issue that we hear every now and then in the debates, whether in radio or in television or even through Facebook, through the social media. And I can also say, and I also share the sentiments of Attorney Guide, that both parties have satisfactorily argued their case. However, allow me to give a few pointers which I hope you can take home as constructive comments uh, in your future debates. First, I appreciate that both parties have outlined their general arguments in their prime ministerial and leader of opposition speeches. In this way, it was easier for me personally to follow. However, while I understand the passion of each side in arguing their position, please do not ever misrepresent or exaggerate facts that are being presented during the debate, lest we be accused of being like the lawyer who was suspended by the Supreme Court twice. So let's not do that. Let's not go into that, di ba? We owe it to our clients eventually, and also to the general public, and also to the court, or in this case, to the adjudicators, that you only present the facts as it is. And the facts that are presented in this case are actually readily available. In fact, if you can just Google it down, parang meron ka na kagad magkaka-idea ka na kung ano. I'm just, parang ano lang ako ano ba? Parang I'm just wondering whether anyone bothered to look at the educational attainment of each president, or of the 16 presidents of the Philippines that we had in 100 years. If you look at the list, lahat ng presidente natin tumungtong ng kolehiyo. Walang presidente tayong hindi nag-college. So so even President Aguinaldo had to went to Letran, but he had to stop because of the cholera outbreak. And you know naman si Erap, he was kicked out of the Ateneo dahil nakipagbubugan. Di ba? Yun yung story. But to make the story short, it's not true that we had a president who is not who was not educated, or who did not attain college education. So I think it's important to know that because that will be the premise of our debate. Diba? So it is also not correct to say, as Attorney Goite pointed out, that the Philippines has a low literacy rate. Sinasabi na ni Attorney Goite that we have one of the highest literacy rates in this part of the world. I think tama na nasa 95% na. During our time in 2000, 2001, 2002, it was 93%. So and then we have also one of the highest functional literacy rates in the country. But literacy rate is just able to read and write. So that could have been a point of information for the other side, di ba? Pero sayang maraming mga missed opportunities which could have enriched the debate. Of course, both parties have beautifully argued their case, but could have been improved kung both parties have been more engaging with each other. Second, let us also not forget the debate here is not whether having a college requirement is compliant with the Constitution. Rather, the issue here is the wisdom of requiring a college degree. So, magkaiba yun. So, I hope, and perhaps it would have been better if we had reduced the period, or the amount of time dedicated in clarifying that we're not talking about constitutionality, and then the other side naman we're saying it's not compliant with the Constitution. Hindi issue here is and third, while it is also good to appeal to the sense of fairness or justice, and I always believe that my personal view as a lawyer, that law is based on natural reason. Tama-tama. Saint Thomas Aquinas, the feast of Saint Thomas Aquinas was just celebrated the other day, or yesterday. So, positive law is based on natural law, or at least most of the time. So it's good to appeal to the sense of fairness and justice, but it's also important, considering that we have already evolved out of that paradigm, to hammer down the soundness of your position based on law and from the prism of the duties and requirements of the presidency. I think both sides have attempted to do that naman. But it could have been better expounded. Yun lang naman yung akin. And likewise, let us also avoid fallacious arguments. So, hindi naman ibig sabihin na ganito yung tao, graduate yung tao na ganyan. Necessarily, it follows that all other college graduates or non-college degree holders would be like that. That's fallacious argument. So let's avoid that and let's stick to the issue. And for the opposing party, whether the government or the opposition, as the case considering the contentiousness of the issues raised and also the facts that are being raised in the debate. Finally, please also do not forget my tip 2 weeks ago when I gave a parang beginner for debates tips, di ba? Na before you argue your position, you should look at it, and I learned this from Haka, you should approach your case from the vantage of the other party. Meaning, before you even argue your case, you already anticipate the arguments of the other party. You know the facts. You know the positive points or yung mga strong points ng other party, and you should already anticipate that in your argument. Of course, it's different in moot court, but ako kasi ganyan ang style ko eh. You anticipate that so that the other party can no longer raise it, and it also strengthens your case, di ba? And then you can say that you really have a mastery of your case. And then ultimately, you can convince the judge or the adjudicators of the soundness of your position. But at the end of the day, I would like to congratulate both sides. Napakagaling nung and I hope to really personally meet you someday. Kung if you have time, you can visit here in Naga City, Camarines Sur. It's a very beautiful place. Kung if you can come here, at pag nanalo ko sa isang kaso, sagot ka na. Pero ang ano pa lang, I just want to inspire you na, at the end of the day, we don't need we have enough competent lawyers. What we need are principled lawyers, competent and principled. Of course, given na yan, you cannot be a mediocre lawyer. Diba? Sobrang dami na rin taong mga sakto lang. You have to be the very best in your profession. Whatever you do, state sweeper ka, maging lawyer ka, you have to be the best in your profession. And I wish I could have that same passion pa rin in court. Sorry for the language, but nakaka-dull rin eh. Because, it becomes routinary. Di ba? Parang may ulit nila sinasabi mo sa court. But you should never lose that passion. And that passion for justice. Remember, you are as lawyers, we are merely acolytes. We are just merely altars. Kumbaga sa simbahan, we're just merely altar servers of justice. So, if you have time, I would recommend that you read the speech of Justice Pompeo Diaz, Passion for Justice. So, and hopefully it can also inspire. And just recently, I gave a talk in another school, and I was able to read that, and I was reminded why I became a lawyer in the first place. Kasi you have to go back to your telos. Very Aristotelian. Kanina Platonic, ngayon Aristotle naman. So we have to stick to the reasons why you became, or why do you want to become a lawyer. And even if you become a lawyer, wag naman sanang makalimutan ito. Because that will spell the difference of what kind of a lawyer you will be. Or you are going to be a lawyer who thinks like a craftsman. You may be the very best lawyer. You may memorize everything. You may memorize the provisions of the law. But you think of the profession as a business, or do you think that the profession that we are into right now, and I also consider you mga law students as part of the profession, is a noble profession for noble people that could be used in national development. Hindi yan JJ, hindi yan Miss Universe answer. That's a true answer. And you can do that in your own communities, in your own clients, right? So yun lang naman. So for both sides, I'd like to congratulate. I especially would like to congratulate the leader of the opposition. Magaling yung ginawa ni leader of the opposition, also the prime minister. Actually, lahat sila magaling. So, yun. If you have time to visit Ateneo de Naga, please do so. And then let me know lang. I think Walbert has my number. Then you can give it to them. Hindi naman ako masyadong privacy freak. So you can give it to kahit kanino. Wag lang sa mga human traffickers. So okay. So with that, thank you very much. Baka nabobore na kayo sa akin. And I look forward in meeting you person. Iba pa rin yung in person. If wala lang talaga akong schedule, I would have flown to Davao. I always fly to Cebu, Bohol, and Iloilo, but I never had the chance to fly again to Mindanao. And I look forward in visiting Mindanao in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney. In fact, for your gracious output and for constantly reminding us that this noble path we're treading on is worth it in the end. And we make it worth it. Now for the final arbitration, that is.
Thank you for. All right. Thank you so much for that, Ronan. Well, congratulations to our debaters from both sides of the House, both from the government bench and the opposition bench. I couldn't be prouder to be a professor here at RMC Sol, seeing that we have a lot of talented students. Considering your background as novice debaters, you have really shown us how excellent you are in applying your critical analysis. We actually had a close fight, and we had to really deliberate after the rounds so that we will be able to announce the winner of the championship match. But nonetheless, no matter who the winner is, I just want you to remember that both of you are already winners in our eyes. You have impressed not just the adjudicators, but also your professors like Attorney Marin and of course the rest of your colleagues here in RMC Sol. You have served as inspirations to your fellow students, and maybe hopefully you will join Diyalogo and be able to train with me every weekend. All right, so in any case, I would just like to personally congratulate, before I give my adjudication, Ms. Angelo Oksho, Ms. Rose Devioso, Mr. Marlon Cabase, Mr. Jerome Tumuran, Mr. Ricardo Musa, and Ms. Marian Ibanez for the excellent remain. Secondly, I'll be dissecting the issues that were discussed during the entire debating round. And lastly, I'll be announcing the final winner. So we had a unanimous decision with, of course, with Attorney Cortez and Attorney Gaite. Just also by just a way of background, I'm so honored to also be joined in the adjudication panel by both Attorney Gaite and Attorney Cortez. So despite their young age, they already are very excellent and of course commendable and lawyers. They had a lot of wins already, and I'm so glad to actually be their batchmate. So thank you so much, Attorney Danny and Attorney Arvin. It is our honor to have you here at RMC Sol. Okay, so for my comments in relation to the general conduct and demeanor of the debations, both of the law and case, for example, case law and jurisprudence throughout the entire debating round, You also cited provisions or relevant provisions of the Constitution, say, for example, from Section 2, Declaration of Policies and Principles, as well as, for example, your Section 3 on the Bill of Rights. So those are very important because you need to be able to anchor them into substantial law, right? Although, of course, just an additional word of caution, it would be better if you'll be able to cite additional issuances, not just the Constitution. We do know that the Constitution is the highest law of the land, but we also have legislations, other legislations which govern our political laws and electoral processes. So if you'll be able to cite that, the better in relation to your substantiation of your arguments and your matters. But please do know that your citation of examples and laws did not go unnoticed. So well done. I saw that you also cited certain examples in Philippine jurisdiction. That was also good. Although I also echo the comments of Attorney Guy and Attorney Cortez to try to not really name the persons during the debate, as you may not necessarily know the position of your adjudicators in relation to these individuals. All right. And the second, I also felt that even if you were very passionate with your advocacy, so that's very good, because as Attorney Cortez stated, you will become lawyers in the future and your job is to be an advocate, not just for your client, but also for justice. In the same vein, it would be good for you to have raised POIs. There was a lack of engagement in relation to the raising of points of information. Very grateful that Attorney Guy discussed the of a raised POI, that will showcase to the adjudicators your capacity to think swiftly on your feet. So you'll be able to show the adjudicators and of course the audience, you, no matter how short the time span, because you cannot really waste your time. You have very limited time of 7 minutes. You cannot waste your time answering a POI. So being your skill as a debater. So for future debates, I do know you are novice debaters, but for future debates, please raise and take POIs. Okay. Also, I felt that you also had well-prepared matter in the sense that you really tried to back your arguments with research. So that's very good. So I think both teams deserve to be in the championship round, considering that both of you, the opposition bench and the government bench, both raised substantive matters and were able to really convince, say, for example, the adjudicators in relation to why you should win a certain issue, which we will be later expounding on. And lastly, just a comment that I also always give my debaters in Diyalogo. So please take note to always label your arguments. So there was a portion during the debate that I felt the burden was placed on the adjudicator to really try to dissect where your arguments are already. So the main thing you have to realize is that sometimes as the adjudicator is taking notes, your arguments may be lost in transition. What do we mean by that? Your arguments can be lost in transition if you do not appropriately label your arguments. That's why I think Attorney Guy also appreciated the move made by Mr. Musa in trying to also separate and orient the adjudicators of what his points are, as well as the points of the next speaker or the deputy leader of opposition. So that's wonderful. Please take note to label your arguments, because great debaters know how to label. All right, now in relation to the issues, so I'll first be giving an overview of the arguments that I saw throughout the debate, and we'll be giving individual speaker comments. For your constructive points, so for the government side, I felt that they were, in a sense, you can also exercise some type of power in creating laws and also in the implementing of laws, and of course foreign affairs, etc. So these types of the president himself, without the benefit of higher education, would sometimes be at a disadvantage. So the best thing that a college degree does is to help someone think in a systematic way. So I felt that the government was trying to give a proposal which essentially aims to elevate the kind of service that our future Philippine president, or even this could also be applied to future other candidates, although they're not covered by the motion, say for example your vice president, senators, and even members of the House of Representatives, in relation to the service that they will be able to provide to our fellow Filipinos. Now this was countered by your opposition side. The opposition was trying to argue, okay, giving us the frame that elected officials should reflect their constituencies, meaning that the anti-poor, for example, if we would impose a certain qualification, and that one could therefore predict that, say, for example, in a democracy, we would have political leaders who may not necessarily have the college degree, but have the necessary experience outside of what we call formal or tertiary education. So I think they were trying to emphasize, this is one of the main arguments that I was able to gather from the opposition side, is that the provision imposing this qualification on the future Philippine president would necessarily rob the poor people of the chance of serving their fellow Filipinos. So at the same, in that sense, the college degree requirement could potentially disenfranchise voters. However, as stated by my previous co-adjudicators, okay, I do believe as well that the literacy of the Philippines, both functional literacy and of course our literacy here in the country, is actually quite high because most Filipinos will be able to reach secondary education. Now the question is, are they able to enter into tertiary, or are they able to actually avail, or do they want to even avail of tertiary education? Now that is the question. But in terms of reading and writing and reaching secondary education, there are statistics which show that there are a lot of Filipinos who are able to do so, given our public educational system. Now, I also felt that from the government side, they were raising this argument of if you are going to be making a policy without a college degree, the public would be better served by having office holders with educational credentials, especially since the president is the highest officer of the land. Say, for example, he exercises commander-in-chief powers and even would necessarily be able to, of course, would deal with other jurisdictions from all around the globe, even if, say, for example, he would delegate these powers. Now, the opposition side was saying that the presence or absence of the college degree could make a statement one way or another, but it is limited, and the context of an individual's life and story should be taken into account. So say, for example, the character. Okay, so I was trying to weigh the differences. Later, I will be saying who I think won these issues, but just to lay a foundation for the arguments raised by both houses, just trying to give an idea as well for the rest of the audience. The government also was able to emphasize, I think I really like this point, that some even blue collar jobs, or most of the, say, for example, government employee positions, plantilla positions, already require a college degree and sometimes even more. So say, for example, I transitioned from private firm to government. I had to take 3 examinations and 3 interviews, as in contrast to the 1 interview I had to take just to enter a private firm. And considering that that's a top firm, so my batchmate actually is Attorney Gaite. We are batchmates in Kisumbing Torres. Okay, so the level that you have to go through just to be accepted as a government employee was actually emphasized by the government side. Okay, so most government positions require college degrees, the passing of civil service exams, for example, and even the passing of so many other requirements. You even have to pass your ASAL, etc., all of these requirements. So why require less of the president? So the college degree is crucial for the job that involves both the creation and also the implementation of laws and issuances. Now, we see the opposition try to counter this by saying that to add additional requirements would require what we call a constitutional amendment. So this was encompassed in the argument, especially of the first 2 speakers, discussing practicality in the sense that it would definitely be hard because we only have 3 ways by which we only have a certain number of ways given by our constitution by which we can amend the constitution or even revise certain provisions. So it's not very easy to do that, and you have to even meet a voting requirement, okay, either by Congress or by the people. So that would definitely be considered exclusionary and even potentially unconstitutional. However, in reality, as stated by my 2 co-adjudicators, this is already something that I think shouldn't have been fully thrashed out in the debate, because the opposition could have either not really argued with the constitutionality or unconstitutionality, but debated within the premise set by the Prime Minister, or totally dished the proposition given by the Prime Minister. Okay, you have to totally give a completely different counter proposal or to argue within the parameters set in the debate. Now, we also have the opposition trying to say that, say, for example, your tertiary, the access to tertiary education is not necessarily available for all people, and you have your government side saying that we have laws giving universal access to all the people in order for them to actually reach tertiary education. So later I'll be giving you an analysis of this, because access does not necessarily mean that people will be incentivized to take that access, and that actually affects whether or not root causes in society can likewise be resolved. Okay, but let's see later on. Now, I think it's also one of the best arguments given by government, in the sense that they wanted to elevate the standard of public service. So government service is governed and regulated by law. So if a person could not necessarily understand the laws that his or her office would require, how can that person release or relieves, or even the laws which are available in his arsenal? as the president, right? So in that sense, I think, or I even thought to myself, that the elevation of the standard of public service is very important as well as necessary. You have to know, even like say for example, for lawyers, we have to know our reliefs and remedies. We have to be able, okay, to know what types of weapons, right, we can use in our arsenal, okay, in relation whenever we face a certain opponent, or even when we have to raise a certain or face a certain issue. Say for example, in civil procedures, like I'm teaching that this semester, if there are, say for example, a judgment already, what are the remedies you can avail of? Will you be availing a motion for reconsideration? Will you be filing for motion for new trial? But there are certain grounds to be able to avail that. Okay, but of course that would apply already to lawyers, because these would refer to procedural rules. But nonetheless, the president himself also have remedies and powers which he himself can only exercise. He cannot delegate those powers. He even has graduated powers provided by your constitution. So it would be very difficult if he does not necessarily understand these types of remedies and laws. Now, of course, the opposition was trying to counter this by saying we need to be able to provide equal access to justice and opportunity, and even, of course, access to public service, because otherwise that would be unconstitutional in relation to the imposition or even the implementation of the people's right to suffrage. So they were trying to give the narrative that the people could actually decide who they want to elect. So the people have to decide whoever they want to elect to represent them. If they are marginalized, if they want to elect someone who does not have a college or tertiary education, or who may not necessarily have a college degree, then that would of course be on the people. Okay, now we have your government whip emphasizing that you should educate the people instead of the government, right? So we have varying contentions in relation to the topic. So now let me go on to the issues of this debate. I found 5 issues that we have to resolve, okay? And I will be announcing who I think won these issues. So firstly, in relation to performance of presidential functions and the exercise of powers vis-a-vis imposing additional requirements. I hope you don't mind me using my bond papers. This is usually how I adjudicate. I really prefer writing them down on pieces of papers. All right, so for in relation to this topic, I felt that I give this win, the win of this issue to the government side, because they were able to fully emphasize the application, why we need the president, given his functions and given his state prerogatives, as well as the various powers that he even cannot delegate to other people, that he has to be well aware of. Meaning, okay, why would he need advisors who have technical knowledge? Right, we need a lot of government people in government service who have technical knowledge and skills, who can actually perform their functions in order to serve the public well. But if the president would solely rely on his or her advisors, that may not necessarily, the people voted the president, and if the president will just mirror the ideas of his or her advisors, then that could actually be a form of misrepresentation of the people's will. Okay, and also in relation to his or her knowledge of the remedies and the laws that would necessarily entail the performance of his functions as the president, then definitely he would need a certain level of competency in relation to understanding these laws and requirements. So I give that win for the issue to the government side. For the second issue in relation to accessibility to education, we give the win to opposition side. Okay, why? Because of course the government side was able to emphasize that we already have laws giving access to tertiary education, and that is correct. Okay, however, we also felt that as stated by the government side, especially in the opposition side, the opposition whip, particularly in the DLO, they were trying to emphasize that this could be anti-poor, because not all the poor people would be incentivized to go and enter into tertiary education. So the access to it, or being given the pathway, does not necessarily mean that people will take that avenue. Okay, so it does not necessarily quell that argument from the part of the opposition that just because you have laws which give access to education means it's properly implemented, because as we can see, we have a tertiary education. So probably there are other root causes which may be okay at the bottom of this problem, and which should be addressed, and which may not. So for that second issue, the opposition in my eyes look that issue. For the third issue on constitutionality and unconstitutionality, definitely I think I would be giving this win to government side. Why? Because government side was able to give the premise, starting from the prime minister, of stating that this debate does not necessarily go into the constitutional or unconstitutionality of the provision provided in the Constitution, but we are debating here on the substance of the law. So I actually appreciate both the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister emphasizing this. So I even recall the Deputy Prime Minister stating that the debate is more about the substantial necessity of this proposition in light of the position of the presidency as well as our electoral democracy. Okay, so in relation to that, I give the win to opposition to the government side, because your opposition, you have to debate within the premise or totally just counter that entire proposition. Okay, so for that win, that's government side. For the fourth issue of this debate, all right, dami ko ng papel. Where's my issue? Okay. Sorry, class. Nag-mix yung paper ko. Nalaglag ko siya, nag-mix. All right, here. For the fourth issue, in relation to the preservation of the essence of democracy vis-a-vis equal protection and equal access to public service. So for this one, I actually give the win to government side. Okay, so this was one of the main contentions of the opposition side. They were trying to say that you need to be able to provide equal access to public service to all of these politicians in order for there to be appropriate representation from the masses, especially of the politicians. But now in this debate, the president that will technically be elected into public office. However, I appreciate the arguments from the entire government bench, starting with your prime minister, going to your government whip. They were trying to emphasize that, say, for example, we have problems in Philippine electoral democracy, wherein we have what we call name recall, right? Or celebrities being elected into office without consideration by the people of their qualifications or even whether or not they have good character. Because the opposition was trying to say, we should look at the character of the president. Does he care for the people? Does he love the people? But in any case, these people may not necessarily be looked potential presidentiables, right? Or they may not necessarily look at the qualifications. They just vote them because of name recall or because they're celebrities. Nakita nila, napanood, for example, sa Provinciano or something. Whatever is the most common show or movie that is currently in mainstream media, right? So that actually does not necessarily equate to a wonderful and functioning democracy. Okay, the democracy in itself, in order to be completely functioning, importance to say, for example, just name recall without qualifications or focus on their characters. Okay, and lastly, I think there is another sub issue I found in this debate, which would require the focus on personal qualifications vis-a-vis character of the presidential candidates. And just because this issue was also not really completely addressed by government side, and the win could be given to opposition side because they were able to fully trash out the characters, or let's say, for example, the focus on the character, love of country, etc. Okay, parang dinaanan lang, one sentence or two sentences na narinig ko from government side trying to dish this argument. So I always teach my debaters to leave no argument left standing. Okay, so the performance of presidential functions and application of the law was also left standing by the opposition side. So opposition side left this argument standing. So that means, for the announcement of the winner, also 3 issues were won by government side and 2 issues were won by opposition side, giving this debate as a government win. So congratulations to Ms. Oksho, Ms. Valdivioso, and Mr. Cabase for the win. But likewise, congratulations to all of our debaters from the opposition for giving us a good fight. So thank you, everyone.
Congratulations. Thank you, Attorney Manalo, for that very, very gracious output. It's always an honor to be in the presence of such brilliance. Congratulations to the winners. Very well deserved. I do hope that with this victory and even with the overall experience in this competition, everyone who participated has come to know, or at least has become aware of, the untapped power and potential inlaid in your young, brilliant minds, our young, brilliant minds, and your sharp tongues. I urge everyone, you guys, as I constantly urge myself, to sharpen those assets. They will come to serve us well someday. I mean, they've served you well enough now in this competition. How much more no when you hone them and utilize them constantly. So on this note, join na kayo ng Diyalogo Club. We are always open for more souls to develop with. Now, we shall use this time to hand our respectable guest adjudicators these certificates. Now, allow me to first read its contents. The certificate of appreciation to Attorney Arvin Paulo D. Cortez in sincere and utmost gratitude for his invaluable participation as our honorable adjudicator during the first Rizalian Cup Championship round held on the 30th January 2022 via Zoom. Given this 30th day of January 2022, Rizal Memorial College School of Law, signed by RMC's School of Law Dean Attorney Ramon Edison C. Batacan, and the RMC Diyalogo Faculty Advisor, Professor Maria Veronica M. Manalo.
Thank you very much.
And the same certificate is also given to Attorney Danielle Joanna C. Gaite, again in sincere and utmost gratitude for her invaluable participation as our honorable adjudicator during the first Rizalian Cup Championship round held on the 30th of January 2022 via Zoom. Signed again by RMC School of Law Dean Attorney Ramon Edison C. Batacan and RMC School of Law Diyalogo Faculty Advisor Professor Maria Veronica M. Manalo. Okay, now well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this was a very successful championship round. But sadly, we have to officially conclude this, and to do that, we would like to call on Attorney Maria Veronica Manalo with her endearing closing remarks.
All right, thank you for that, Ronan. Assistant Dean, Attorney Marian Castillo Pasha, Attorney Daniel Joanna Gaite, Attorney Arvin Paulo Diyalogo Cortez, my colleagues, and of course my students from the Rizal Memorial Colleges Incorporated School of Law, good afternoon. First and foremost, on behalf of Diyalogo, I would like to express our deepest appreciation and gratitude to our Assistant Dean, Attorney Marian Castillo Pasha, for her invaluable support and generosity, which greatly contributed to the success of the first ever Rizalian Cup of RMC Sol. We truly couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much, Attorney Marian. I would also like to extend our gratitude and appreciation to my fellow adjudicators during the final round of the first ever Rizalian Cup. Just by way of background, Attorney Danny Gaite is my batchmate and Kisumbing Torres, member for Baker & McKenzie International, also remains a good friend of mine to this day. She's also one of the best debaters and mooters that I personally know. So thank you, Attorney Danny, for gracing us with your presence today. Thank you as well to Attorney Arvin. Attorney Arvin has been my friend since my undergraduate years in the University of the Philippines. If you can see, he's been also giving you theories of political science because we were both classmates during our BA Political Science undergraduate degree when we were still in UP. And he's also a very amazing litigator from Accra and now doing his own solo practice. So thank you, Attorney Arvin. Our utmost gratitude to the both of you for spending your Sunday with all of us here at RMC Sol. I likewise wish to thank all the participants who have attended this competition, who raised pertinent questions during the orientation, and who cheered vigorously for the debaters in each and every round of the first ever Rizalian Cup. Actually, I was just expecting around 30 to 50 attendees every weekend, but we always reach more than 100 attendees every weekend. So thank you to all of our participants. Thank you so much for your generous support to your batchmates and to your colleagues in law school. Well done. And of course, this event will not be possible without the hard work and commitment of Walbert Golling, the president of Diyalogo, as well as all the members of the organizing team of Diyalogo for the first ever Rizalian Cup. I'm so proud of all the members of Diyalogo. We are truly a family and we were able to organize this event together. Thank you very much, team, for spearheading the first ever Rizalian Cup. Our vision came to fruition thanks to your commendable hard work and utmost dedication. So as we mark the end of this competition, I just wish to commend you all for having made the time out of your busy schedules, considering our competitions or our events are scheduled on Sundays, to attend this important event to learn more about debate, its mechanics, and its importance in both your personal and professional lives. So just to give you a little background, as discussed during our event, debating requires a skill that translates directly into your academic, social, and professional applications. It can develop your creative thinking, problem solving, active listening, critical analysis, and prioritization, as well as your character attributes of, say, for example, resilience, empathy, and most importantly, confidence. Confidence of speaking in front of a crowd, in front of a public. It makes people good communicators, which necessarily means that they are effective at influencing other people. And by being able to influence others, you also gain your own power in your own ways. And of course, this helps you represent others and be able to really advocate for whatever you believe in. So you become passionate advocates, as stated by Attorney Gaite. So if you look at successful people from across the spectrum, most of them will have accrued crucial skills from public speaking or from debating itself. Furthermore, one of the objectives of this competition is to truly make the students realize the value of listening to opposing opinions. So, di ba, malapit na yung elections, that's why both of our motions really delve on Philippine electoral systems. Of course, we have contending opinions, but I really want to emphasize this, since the lawyer community and debating community, these communities are both small. You have to be able to listen to others' opposing opinions, maintain grace while doing so, and respect other people's right to speak their minds despite personal dissents. If we do not open our minds to the views of others, if we do not have regard for the reasonable points of our opponents, we will be considered prisoner of our own minds. Therefore, defeat or victory in debate should be born with the spirit of a sportsman. And we were able to see this with all of our debaters for the first ever Rizalian Cup. So congratulations for being wonderful sportsmen. Now, through our debates as well, we want to attempt to help you learn how to really arrive at the truth, or how to be able to do well when it comes to framing issues and perspectives. And I hope you were able to learn that during the first ever Rizalian Cup. So indeed, the famous quote that says, "I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it," encapsulates the spirit of debate, the freedom of expression initiated or pronounced in our highest law of the land, the Constitution, and the respect for the marketplace of ideas in a highly functioning democratic society. On behalf of RMC Sol, we look forward to seeing you again in our similar events in the future. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Also, I'd like to request everyone to turn their cameras on, because alam niyo na, it's the proverbial group picture taking after the event. So let us see those beautiful and handsome faces. There we go. Dami.
Good afternoon again. So we have 5 frames. So let's start with the first frame. 1, 2, 3, smile. Waki. Thank you. To our next frame. 1, 2, 3, smile. Waki. Thank you. So third frame. 1, 2, 3, smile. Waki. Well, I think we're good already. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you again so much for the support, guys.
Thank you. Happy Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.